On today's episode of the show, we discuss that even though it seems that the Louisville roster may be all the way full, there are some rumors that Louisville could make a push for Illinois transfer Coleman Hawkins. We'll discuss on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. For those who don't know who I am, this is my third season hosting the Locked On Louisville podcast. I am a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. When Frank Anselm out of Georgia committed to Louisville, it seemed like the roster was full. However, there are some rumors that the Cardinals could make a push for Illinois transfer Coleman Hawkins. We'll talk about how possible and likely this is. What are some of the deciding factors? Would this be a good fit for both parties? And if Louisville were to want to add another player, what would be the needs on the roster? So a lot of stuff to break down and discuss on today's episode of the show. We begin with the opportunity at hand. Now, when Frank Anselm, the Georgia transfer, committed to the Cardinals, it seemed as if all 13 scholarships had been filled. There have been rumors swirling and circulating that one of the red shirts could be placed as a walk-on this upcoming season, allowing for another player to be entered into the mix, take that scholarship and play this season, and then after the 2024-25 campaign, the redshirt player would then be put back on scholarship. Now, I mentioned that until we got confirmation on that, I wasn't really going to dive into speculation, but it seems that we are going to retract that sentiment, and I'm going to bring to you what Ty Spalding, the owner of Louisville Rivals, managing editor for the Louisville Rivals site, what he said on the, I think it was the roundtable with James Strebel this afternoon. Ty made some interesting comments, and I'm just going to kind of paraphrase here. Jeff Lightsey, Louisville media member and regular host on 93.9 Ville ESPN 680, tweeted out the cliff notes, and definitely a big shout out to him. This is what was said. This is what Ty said. Basically, 6 players on the roster can't earn NIL traditionally due to international ties. That was one of the questions that we had over the course of adding the players throughout April and May was, well, what are the NIL regulations with players that, are on a visa playing in the United States? Well, if that is true, then we've got our answer. He goes on to say one of the 2 redshirts could potentially walk on, opening up another scholarship. Again, just more smoke to this whole debate. The last thing that is mentioned on this tweet is with the extra NIL money and extra scholarship, this could lead to another late addition. In parentheses, Coleman Hawkins, ? With the eye emojis. So, again, don't take this as it's going to happen for certain. I still think that for Louisville to make another addition, it has to be a special type of circumstance. All the stars will have to align for this move. I don't think you're going to see Louisville making a move just to make one. Let's get that clear. Now, it seems that at the same time, the Cardinals aren't fully done trying to improve this roster. And if the right opportunity arises, then they will definitely look into it and try to make this team better. For me, as it relates to the situation of Coleman Hawkins, who Hawkins is one of, if not the best player in the portal at the current moment, averaged double digits for Illinois last year, 12-6 on a balanced team. 6'10", pretty much plays like a guard, but sort of in that forward role. Think Case and Pryor type level of production. But Coleman Hawkins is, a player that has played multiple seasons in the Big 12, or I'm sorry, not Big 12, Big 10, and has been a very, very good player. A lot of production. Unfortunately, Louisville fans do not want to hear this, but I wouldn't hold my breath on this particular recruitment. It's not impossible for Louisville to get involved here, which I think that they might, but closing the deal is going to be challenging for a couple of different reasons. I look at the situation as being more reasons point to Louisville not adding Coleman Hawkins than the opposite. And I think it's going to come down to whether or not Louisville has the NIL budget to afford to give that much NIL money to Coleman Hawkins, because there's been rumors that he is looking for great Osibor money, who's making just around $2 million, probably a little less. It's to be determined whether the Cardinals have $2 million laying around. And that could be, honestly, I think that that's going to be one of the main deciding factors. Is you're not going to get a player like Hawkins to take a discount. There obviously are probably going to be a strong list of suitors. The market for a player like Hawkins will be determined by the highest bidder, and I think that this could be a very high bid situation. So NIL is going to be probably the main thing to focus on. If Louisville determines that, hey, look, we've got the NIL money, or maybe they don't, but they go to some big name boosters and they're like, look, I know you've already given some money, but this is the player we're trying to get. He is a guy that can raise your ceiling 100%. Do you mind throwing in some extra money to make this work? And that is a possible phenomenon. Like, that is a trend that could happen, and that is a possibility that if Louisville does not have the money, they might be able to raise that money, or they might have that money. Then again, my skepticism is just from a too good to be true level standpoint. I don't really know the NIL numbers that have been thrown out there, but Louisville seemingly has given a good amount of NIL to Terrence Edwards Jr., Cason Pryor, Chucky Hepburn, multiple other players that have joined this program and chose this team over some other Power 5 opposition. So I think that for starters, you have to have that NIL budget, but you also have to be comfortable winning a bidding war, because I imagine the Carolina teams are going to get involved. It would surprise me if North Carolina was not involved. You could see Duke getting involved as well. Arkansas seems to be that team that missed out on Case and Pryor, but could throw the bag at a guy like Coleman Hawkins. Iowa has seemingly been a school that might enter the mix. We just don't know yet. It's still early. Hawkins withdrew from the NBA draft right at sort of the very last minute on Wednesday evening. It's going to come down to whether or not Louisville can afford to bring in a player like Hawkins, because he's going to command great Osibor level money, as he should. I think for me, that's sort of the main trip up here is, does Louisville have those funds? And if what Ty Spalding says is correct, you could be led to believe that that is the case. Now, Ty has been very, very on the money when it comes to what he says about Louisville. Granted, things in the transfer portal change all the time. So not only do you have to have a slotted budget for Hawkins, you then had to have a little bit more than that, because it's inevitably going to turn into a bidding war. But the Cardinals have been rumored to be involved with Hawkins. Hawkins, I guess, tweeted a picture of him, Frank Anselm, and Jalen Green. Shout out to my guy, Jalen Green, Houston Rockets fan. A picture of those three at a AAU, I think it was AAU Adidas circuit way back when, and he must have deleted it. But Coleman Hawkins is very much in tune with social media, loves to engage with fan bases, and is all about, playing that part on social media. So I would caution those to really look into too much on social media, because it looks like he's showing love to many, many fan bases. So, and then there's the possibility that he might end up back at Illinois, although I'm not necessarily so sure. He said, I think, in an interview, he won't play in the Big Ten, won't play in the Big East, wants to go somewhere where you can enjoy football. Well, get ready to learn Joker and the Thief, buddy. But it's a possibility if Louisville wants to make it a possibility. I think that he is a starter 100%, and I think that he can coexist with Case and Pryor in the Louisville front court. Adding a player like Coleman Hawkins, really one word is intriguing. It's really interesting to see, what this could look like for Louisville on the court. So before we get into whether or not this is a good fit for both parties, I do want to tell you about our friends over at Gametime, and we will get into whether or not this is a good fit coming up here in just a moment. At this time, I want to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. I would love to attend the NBA Finals up in Boston, up in the Garden. Boston seems like an unbeatable opponent at the moment. I think that home atmosphere would be incredible. And I've taken a look at some of the deals already, and they're fantastic. You can save up to 60% of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. A lot of great opportunities with Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, if you are continuing to find yourself watching Fox Sports or ESPN and you're done with all the screaming and the shouting, you need to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We sort of discussed that if Louisville wants to add another player, the avenues to make that possible are in the very distant future. But even if the stars do align, you question, with the logjam of minutes needed at the moment, does it make sense to add a player like Coleman Hawkins? What is his fit on this team? For starters, does he fit with Case and Pryor in the front court? And I think he does. Now, you wouldn't have a traditional rim protector. I think that Pryor and Hawkins do a lot of things very similarly. They are both very good opportunistic secondary rim protectors. Hawkins has a 3.1% block rate, 6'10", 225 pounds. Averaged over a block per game in each of his past two collegiate seasons, also over a steal per game too. So he can guard probably the 3 through the 5, and he and Pryor will be able to switch. They are extremely athletic. They move well for their size, and I think that defensive switchability actually works to their benefit. And I think that Hawkins is a better on-ball defender and rim protector than Noah Waterman, and Waterman coming off the bench would basically be unfair for opposing teams. Hawkins, most of his offense, close to the most, 38% of his offense comes from around the rim. He shoots 60% in the paint. Outside of that, he's more of a 3-and-D type player. Very, very efficient above the break, basically meaning the spot in between the corner and the top of the key. shoots over 30% from both sides above the break. I think 40% on one of those sides. But the vast majority of his shots outside of from the paint will come from the three-point line in the spots that I just explained. And the three-point shooting, 5%, 5 attempts per game, basically 4.6, 37% three-point shooting. So not only is he a respectable shooter, he's a respectable volume shooter. Sort of like Case and Pryor, is you have both of these guys, and even maybe combine basically two of those two guys with Noah Waterman, and have those three guys sort of switching out in the rotation. And at any given time, you have a big man that is able to step out and hit the three ball. And I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying he is a great creator on offense, but like Pryor, like Waterman, his ball handling is sort of underrated, moves like a guard, hard to stay in front of, because if you are as large as him, you're probably not as quick. And if you are as quick, he probably has a little bit of a height advantage. So imagining a front court with Hawkins and Pryor, I mean, it is as unique as it gets. You're getting two unicorn-esque players that are over 6'10", move really, really well, are solid in transition. Hawkins ranks in the 82nd percentile nationally in transition. Efficient in spot-up situations. Hawkins over 70% in those situations. Able and willing passers, 15% assist rate for Coleman. You have two players that do a lot of the same things and can still be effective around the rim in pick and roll situations. Like, if this were to happen, I want to see what teams scheme up to try to defend the Cardinals. Because not only are you bringing in all these skill sets that can pass and shoot well and they attack the boards, but they play really quickly. One of the top pace of play systems in America, you would assume, if anything, from the College of Charleston can be brought over. This is a good fit. Anytime you can add a player that can give you, let me just tell you, if Coleman Hawkins joins this team, number one, you are immediately, without a shred of doubt, a top 25 team preseason. Probably top 15. You are a Final Four contender. And I do not like to toss that around lightly. For those that know me to lean more on the pessimistic side than optimistic, for what it's worth. If I'm telling you that this is a Final Four caliber team, know that I don't view that as hyperbolic whatsoever. I'm not saying that as a hot take or clickbait. I'm saying that because I truly believe it. You have, in that case, 12 legitimate players in a system that could go 9 to 10 deep. So it would make fair enough sense to add a player like Hawkins. And I know that some players will be on the outside end in terms of minutes. But again, 10 players have been utilized in Kelsey's rotation throughout his collegiate head coaching career. So you could argue that this is even more insurance, but offensively makes sense. Gives Louisville so many different options of how they can deploy both Waterman and Pryor. I mean, there are situations where you could run Waterman, Pryor, and Hawkins at the same time, and that is, I mean, it's just unique. It's intriguing. And defensively, sure, you might not have a true rim protector, but you added a very good on-ball defender. You added a solid, opportunistic secondary rim protector. Averaged 6.1 rebounds per game despite playing a ton on the perimeter. Let me make no mistake here. Despite the ability to stretch the floor, he does play a ton inside. He exploits mismatches around the rim, is able to bang down low, and also has shown examples of a growing mid-range offensive game. So if the question that you're trying to ask yourself is whether or not this is a good fit, I don't really see that being an issue whatsoever. I think Hawkins is one of those guys that can raise your ceiling to where it makes a ton of sense right away. So, I mean, I'm not going to discredit anyone for feeling like Louisville should be good with the roster they have now, but with 11 total scholarship guys, or 13 total scholarship guys, 11 available players in a system that has a lot of switching, I think that it sort of overpowers the opposition. But coming up here soon, we're going to discuss what the opposition might look like, what the devil's advocate to this situation is. If not Coleman Hawkins, what are the other possible needs that Louisville could look to address if they are convinced to use this final spot? And we'll do that here coming up here shortly. Before we get into the final segment, I do want to thank you all again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. For those who have not heard, the Locked On Louisville will officially be going into off-season mode in the months of June and July. All that changes is that we will go from 19 monthly episodes to about 12 to 13. So no more 5 episodes a week. It's going to be more so 3, maybe 4, I guess maybe 5. It really just depends on scheduling. So what I need from you all, my everydayers, give me some topics you want to be discussed, some questions you want answered, some possible ideas that you all have. I am all ears. But we are not done with the month of May just yet. Continuing on along in this Coleman Hawkins discussion, there will be some that will oppose this possibility. And I think that those that do are disagreeing in the name of roster construction and overall roles here. Because on the court, Hawkins would give you an upgrade in the front court. Like, I believe him to be better than Noah Waterman. No disrespect to Noah. I just think that Hawkins is one of the top 10 players in the portal overall, even players that have already committed. So on the court, it makes a ton of sense. There will be some that question, well, you already have 11 of the 13 that will be playing next season, and almost all of these guys, if not all of them, are looking to have a role, and there's already some questions on how each player is going to get enough time on the court. They're going to have a minutes reduction. Why add another wrench into the equation here and make things even more difficult? I will tell you why. 2 reasons. Number one, it raises the ceiling. Anytime you have an opportunity to make your team better, to maximize the offseason, and to give yourself the best chance to, number one, make the tournament, number 2, go far in the tournament, and number 3, change the national perception of this program at the moment, you do it, hands down. Number 2, don't forget, this system emphasizes a ton of switching because of the pace of play, so it won't be uncharacteristic to see a rotation of 9 to 10 players on a regular basis. Well, at this point, you have 11 available with Kobe Rogers and Ali Khalifa redshirting. You're giving yourself some more insurance here because let's say 1 to 2 players gets hurt, because injuries do happen, unfortunately, and knock on wood, we don't see Louisville have to endure any injuries. Injuries do happen. So, proposing a hypothetical here, let's say that Louisville has 1 to 2 injuries, and you're down to 9 to 10 available guys. And maybe the Cardinals don't have the scholarship numbers or available players to fully be able to play Pat Kelsey basketball. Do you change your coaching philosophy because of that? And at that point, you are sort of half committing to the pace of play style? I think you have to give yourself some opportunities here and some insurance. But putting Coleman Hawkins, that discussion to the side for the moment, let's say it's not Hawkins, but Louisville is still set on adding someone else. What are you looking for here? Well, I think that there's 2 things. Number 1, a rim protector. Ugonna Onyenso would make a ton of sense from Kentucky. He withdrew from the draft, one of the nation's premier shot blockers. You're not getting a ton of offensive production and upside, but the defensive ceiling is incredible. He fits really well with both Kason Pryor and Noah Waterman, and gives you that aspect of this, or gives you that aspect that you don't necessarily have. You have James Scott, who very, very solid. I think he's going to play a role for this team, but you don't have a premier Power 5 shot blocker right off the bat, and I think that Onyesu will be able to play that role. On-ball defender, I think he has to get better on-ball wise and not have to chase blocks, which it looks like he did a little bit this past year, but already an upgrade in terms of rim protection, which people have already been wondering. So again, at this point, it doesn't seem like there are too many options out there that would fit Louisville's level, but if you were to go out and get someone, a rim protector would make a ton of sense, because outside of James Scott, you have a handful of guys that have high block rates, suggesting opportunity and secondary rim protecting, but not like a true rim protector that players are going to think twice about driving in on. And number two, I think guard depth, because you have depth in the front court, at the wing spot. You have multiple wings that can sort of be hybrid guards or forwards, but ball handling, I think you have three true guards: Corin Johnson, Chucky Hepburn, Rain Smith. Terrence Edwards can play the guard. Javon Hadley, Kenai Roots, Abubakar Traore, more fours than they are twos. And if injuries happen, then you are going to be really risking it, because you'll have two guys that truly handle the ball. Let's say if one of Hepburn, Johnson, or Rain Smith go down, then you have two remaining. Foul trouble can happen, more injuries. There's so many possibilities. Again, it's in the name of insurance for this roster. If you can go out and get a depth piece at guard, maybe not a player that, because it makes no sense to bring in a player that is just going to redshirt and sit the bench, because at that point, why would you even take one of the redshirt guys off scholarship to begin with? You are making a move here with the idea that he's going to play a role. So, like Frank Anselm, he could be a guy just playing situational minutes, or he could be a player that is featured into the rotation. Again, I think that you make it work on paper first, and then you figure out how it's going to work on the court. You have about 6 months to do so. I'm not really worried about the timing of this at the moment. I want Louisville to get the best roster that they can, and if Pat Kelsey believes that this current roster is the best roster, I'm fine with that. Louisville doesn't have to make another move for me to be excited about this team. But if the coaching staff does believe that, hey, look, there's a unique opportunity here for us to go out and plausibly bring in a very good player and help this team out and help this team reach the ceiling, then you're in a very, very good spot. So for me, that's sort of where I'm at. We'll see exactly what Pat Kelsey does. But if you see Louisville even so much as mentioned by national media as being interested in certain transfers, then you sort of understand what Louisville's stance on the current roster is. So we will continue to closely monitor the situation at this point. But at this point in time, that will wrap up today's episode of the show. We will conclude the month on tomorrow's episode, where we will start to discuss what the expectations are for every member of next year's men's basketball team. We will discuss one player per segment. There will be 4 episodes dedicated to men's basketball player individual expectations. But we will see you right back here very